Shuni classes. Thank you, Jeff. I want to thank Jeff in advance, if I forget at the end, for coming out of his COVID and to shepherd us tonight.
Oh boy.
None of us are in danger. It doesn't happen over the internet. That's what I've been told by science. But there are conspiracy theorists who believe that Taylor Swift is probably behind the whole COVID thing, as well as everything else in the world. But anyway, so we had 3 sessions in the fall, and we're have these 3 in the spring, winter, spring, and it's studying this book, Dear Shuni, collection of midrashim that have been created by Israeli women, scholars, rabbis, poets, in a traditional style of midrash. Just for those of you, just as a reminder, midrash as a form flourished during the days of the creation of the Mishnah and Talmud, and then further into the early Middle Ages. And then it stopped as a form as other forms took over, including commentary, halachic compendiums, like eventually the Shulchan Aruch and the Torah and others. Eventually also Hasidic tales, Kabbalah, a lot of literary forms evolved later. And Midrash as the form kind of fell into mostly disuse. It was, we quoted it, what existed, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of midrashim, but they stopped being created really in the modern era. They started again, and this group of women have now published 2 volumes, 2 in Hebrew, one in English, and they are, in the traditional sense, they use a text from usually the Torah, but also potentially from the Tanakh, from the Bible, Hebrew Bible. And then they take it and they do what kind of is a drashing, a probing into it in order to find some meaning in our daily lives. That's the way it was used originally as well. When we were confronting the Romans, Midrash was a way of commenting on the world of the Romans through the exploration of the biblical text. Later commentary was able to do it, and then sermons. In the late Middle Ages and the early modern period, it was really sermons that took over, rabbinic sermons that comment on the times. But Midrash now has been brought back by these women. And it's the first time that we have a body of literature written almost exclusively by women who are scholarly in Jewish studies and Hebrew studies, and who are adding a female voice, a woman's experience, into the process. Up until now, women, as I've said before, were the subject of the men. We talked a lot about women. We used stories about women, but it was a subject. Women were a subject, and not all that well known by the early rabbis. They were forbidden to be alone with a woman. Man was forbidden to be alone with a woman, except for his own wife, even his daughter. Traditionally, a man was forbidden to be alone with his daughter. There were strict rules about if you were in the company of a woman that was not your wife, there had to be another man with you. It was, a very restrictive world, and they didn't know much about the way women thought because they didn't ask, nor did they pay much attention to women's expressions of feelings or ideas. So they were coming at it from a male perspective. Dear Shuni, the great kind of innovation is they come at it as women. They come at it from a woman's perspective. Many of them have been mothers, grandmothers. Many of them have experienced, some of them have experienced war as soldiers, but as women within the system. They've also experienced the problems that women have had moving ahead in corporate life or in other kinds of areas. So they bring all of that, something that the men knew nothing about. And because they published at the beginning in 2003, so they were writing at the end of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st, and they're still writing. So we've had them now for at least 30 or so years writing that we know of. There may have been even earlier, but it's still very new. And it's a new kind of innovation. The fact that Sefaria actually uploaded the 2 Hebrew volumes was part of why Sefaria is so valuable to us, because it is not run by Haredim. It is not run by modern Orthodox. It's run by people who believe, as modern Jews, that libraries should be open. They are in the same form as public sharing, like Wikipedia. They believe, and in fact, on Sefaria, you can, if you were capable of it, you can translate texts that haven't been translated and upload them into Sefaria as their community translations. And that is what is happening. People are choosing a text, translating it for their own purposes, not just into English. They have, I don't know how many languages, well over a dozen on there. And you can find, therefore, English translations that continue to grow as people who are fluent in Hebrew and English are translating these texts for their own purposes, maybe to teach a class, maybe in order to share with someone that they're studying with in Chavruta or in another session. So that's a constantly evolving process on Sefaria. And Sefaria has also just uploaded an AI component.
Wow.
So that they are working with AI in order to enhance what they already have. And that's a new process as well. They are actually teaching AI what they need and how AI can guide and help them as they guide the AI. So Sefaria is this kind of evolving library, but it also is open to all voices. So for instance, I learned recently that the women's commentary, many of you have seen it, the green commentary, we have it in our Torah study, that was published by the CCAR many years ago, I think now 50 years ago, has now been bought, the rights have been acquired, and they are uploading it into Sefaria. So, and that was almost exclusively written by women, largely rabbis and cantors, and women scholars, women professors. So that is being uploaded, and some of the Orthodox are leery about using Sefaria, because once their members go on, they have the freedom to search. And therefore, you'll find a lot of women's voices appearing, especially in the source sheets. Women teachers who have prepared source sheets, and they're there. So that becomes a problem for the Haredi rabbis. It's not so much a problem for the Haredim themselves. The laity is much more liberal than the Orthodox rabbinate is. The rabbinate is more conservative. And we're seeing that, by the way, in Israel right now about the new proposed legislation for service in the IDF. The Haredi community is much more open to serving in the IDF. Their rabbis are not open to them serving. And so they are pressuring the government to make permanent the exclusion of yeshiva bochers from the IDF, whereas there are many yeshiva bochers who actually want to serve and would like to have the opportunity. So that's all part of the shifting nature of the Jewish world. Any comments before we take a look at the first text? Or questions or?
So this began exactly when, and is it from Israel, the original source of women's midrashim? So
Well, yes, the formal process of Dir Shuni grew out of Israeli women, and all of the texts, both volumes, as far as I know, were all from Israeli women. Now, I don't know, I can't say it just grew out there because they were very aware of what was happening in America as women became rabbis and started publishing commentaries. They knew about the women's Torah commentary. They know about other writings of women philosophers and theologians. They know about Rachel Adler and others who've been writing now for 50 years. And so all of that influenced them. And, it goes back and forth. But the Midrashim came out of Israel.
wow.
Okay. So, Jeff, if you would share our text. I've chosen two tonight, both related to the story of Exodus, because that's where we are at this point. And this one, you'll recognize the text. Az yashir Moshe u'vnei Yisrael et hashira hazot ladonai. Right. Vayomru lemor ashira ladonai ki ga'o ga'a. Az yashir Moshe is in our Sidurim. It begins the Micha Mocha, right? It's the introduction to it. It's the Shabbat Shira, the Song of the Sea. It's ubiquitous in our tradition. It exists in all different forms. And it is in some Haggadot. It appears in some Haggadot as well for Pesach. And that's kind of a theme that we're going to look at. The one who wrote this is Tamar Duvdevani. By the way, the word Duvdevani, which is cherry, is also one of the elite units of the IDF, is the Duvdevani unit. It's one of their special forces, active right now in Gaza. Okay, so you can see the line. Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. They said, and this is what's important for the Midrash, for Tamar Duvdevani. It says Moses, in effect, they understand, led this song. It's in the singular, Az Yashir Moshe, right? If it were plural, you want to take a stab at it, Mark? What would Yashir be in the plural?
Yashirim?
No, good. That's good. That is a plural, but that's a noun plural. It would be Yashiru, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
In the verb form. Mark has been studying Hebrew, so I'm letting him show off a little.
or miss it.
It's okay. You at least you were
good.
in the ballpark. You were in the ballpark. So Az Yashiru Moshe V'nei Yisrael would be then Moses and the Israelites all sang, right? But it says Az Yashir, meaning singular. So it's Moses sang and the Israelites. So now the rabbis play with that in other midrashim. What happened? And one of the ideas is Moses would sing a verse and the Israelites would echo the same verse, right? That makes sense. That would be Moses leading, the Israelites following verse by verse. But then it goes, at Ashira Hazot, this song, Ladonai, it was for God, Vayomru, and they said, Lemor, saying. Now that repetition is not what we're talking about here, but that's used in other midrashim. And then it says, Ashira Ladonai. That aleph, Ashira Ladonai, says, I will sing.
Mhm.
I will sing for God. That's Moses saying, Asherah, I will sing. And then the people all said, Asherah, each of them saying, I will sing, right? Not we will sing, Nashira, but Asherah. Okay. So that's where Tamar Duvdevani is going to take off. Okay, Bubbie, you're our initial reader. You've volunteered enough that you have that right.
Okay. We start with then Miriam.
Yes, please.
Okay. Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her and danced with timbrels. And Miriam chanted for them, sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver he has hurled into the sea.
Okay, wait. Now we have to look at what she said. Look at her quote. How is that different from what Moshe said?
It's a command.
It is a command, and who does it not focus on?
God. He doesn't not vote.
Oh, she's singing to God. Sing to the Lord.
Yes, right? Remember what Moshe said. Just
It does-
scroll up just a little.
It doesn't,
Okay, there.
it doesn't focus on I.
Right. It doesn't say, I will sing to the Lord. It says, sing
Knowing
to the
them.
Lord. So
Yeah.
Tamar notices that. Miriam doesn't focus it on her. She doesn't say, I will sing to the Lord, because it's Miriam chanting. You see it? Miriam
Right.
chanted for them.
Sing
To the Lord. Miriam is focused on them. Moshe was focused on himself. Okay, now she notices that as a woman because
Men are focused.
often women notice that men tend to be more focused on themselves than on others. Okay, and in this case, here are the words right there. Why didn't Miriam just chant out Asherah like Moses did? But she changed it to Shiru Ladonai, sing to the Lord, right? So now she's going to riff off of that, and she's going to make this midrash based on that notion. Okay, Bubbie, now if you would continue.
For the sake of what was it stated, and Miriam chanted for them, as the song had already broken out from the mouth of Moses. For it is stated, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Rather, it is that Miriam knew a song that Moses did not know.
Oh, okay. Why is she singing, the question is, when Moses already led the song, right? Now, Moses led the song with the Israelites, B'nai Israel. The assumption when it says B'nai Israel means everybody, right? Now, you could argue, okay, maybe he only led the men, and Miriam is going to lead the women. But it doesn't say that in the text. It says B'nai Israel. So if they just sang this song, why is Miriam having them sing again? What is it that she is leading them in? Is it the same song or is it a different song? Now, Tamar says Miriam knew a song that Moses did not know. Her song that she knew was a song that she knew that he didn't know. Okay, so that, if you remember last week, when we looked at the women from Egypt, and we focused on Miriam as a little girl. Do you remember? Miriam by the reeds, Miriam as a servant in the bathhouse, Miriam having a relationship with the daughter of Pharaoh. Miriam is the one that gets daughter of Pharaoh to have Yocheved be the milk, supply the milk of breastfeed for the baby Moses.
Right.
Miriam, in that midrash that was created that we looked at last week, Miriam is a real activist and always has something else to add. right? And this Miriam also is adding something not of Moses's. She didn't just repeat what Moses sang. She has a song that she knew that Moses didn't know,
Hmm.
right?
And
Okay.
did she bring her timbrel to add a little musical to it?
I'm sorry, Mark, I missed that.
Did Miriam bring her, besides knowing a song, did she bring her timbrel to accompany this song that she is teaching everybody?
Well, so Mark is pointing out what early Midrashes had talked about, which is why did Miriam bring a timbrel? I mean, if you're leaving Egypt and you got to take a sack on your back, you got to limit what you can take, right? Why would you take the timbrel? I mean, why would you put, an instrument like that into your little sack and schlep it out there? You don't know where you're going. You're going into some kind of desert wilderness, and you're bringing a timbrel. I mean, that's kind of frivolous, it seems like. But one of the midrashim that we've studied in the past says that Miriam knew we would have reason for celebration. She was hopeful. She had tikva, hope, and she wanted to sing and dance in celebration. And she knew it would uplift everyone's spirits. And so she and the women brought the musical instruments because they wanted to have that moment of celebration for all the people after all this slavery. But what you just asked is, could you argue that Miriam knew that she was going to get an opportunity to sing her own song, maybe, and the timbrel was to accompany that song that she would teach? That's a midrash you'll have to write. I haven't seen one. I haven't seen that yet, but that doesn't mean it can't be written, right? A midrash has to be based on a biblical verse, and it has to have some legitimate point that can be drashed on, like what she did with Ashira and Shiru. You have to have something that's a little out of the ordinary to be able to drash on it, to make a midrash, right? You can't just in whole cloth say, I want to talk about Miriam and the timbrels. You'd have to find a little moment there where you could use that. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that's how midrash, legitimate midrash, in its traditional form, that's how it would play out. Okay, Bubbie, you continuing?
Okay. What was the song of Moses? Moses called, I will sing to the Lord, which is the song of the isolated individual, which does not combine itself to the aggregate of choruses, voices, and melodies. Moses sought to extract the voice from everyone and redeem their song.
Okay, let's look at that for a second. So the song of the isolated individual, right? It doesn't have an aggregate of choruses, voices, and melodies. What does that mean? There's a word for it in music.
Solo.
Right. And what is the word? What is the aspect of music that voices, melodies, and choruses bring?
Harmony.
Harmony, right? Moshe taught a solo song to the people. So he said, Ashira Ladonai ki ga'u ga'a, and they chanted back the same melody, each of them the same. There was no harmony. There was no chorus. There were no other voices, other sounds, other levels, right? Miriam heard the voice of a symphony of voices, harmony of voices. She heard a community of voices that would harmonize together. Moshe, look, he's raised as a prince in the house of Pharaoh. He is a solo leader. He leads up on the mountain by himself. When he goes up to be with God, at the burning bush, he's by himself. When he goes up to receive the Aseret Dibrot, he's by himself. Joshua's waiting halfway down the mountain. He's alone. He sometimes has people holding his arms up, right? We have that case, but he is the focus. It's the solo individual. It's leading as an individual. It's what what's his, I just blanked on it. In Collins' book, Good to Great, he talks about levels of leadership. The fourth level is the solo leader who orders people. And the fifth level is the team leader who rallies everyone around and works and enhances the team so that they can come together to do what they can't do alone. So Moshe is a 4 leader, but Miriam sees the beauty in harmony and in teamwork. She brings choruses, voices, melodies, right?
Right.
That's the voice that she hears that he doesn't hear. That's the melodies that she hears. That's the song that she knew that Moshe didn't know. So then we go toward the end of this.
But the song of redemption was still incomplete. And what was the song of Miriam? Sing to the Lord, an expression of the plural.
Right. So her song is the plural song. It is the harmonic song of everyone adding their voice. It's like, if you've ever heard in some synagogues where they're used to harmonizing, I don't know if you've ever heard it, where Shema will be harmonized by the congregation when it's sung. People will find different levels. If you go to a place like Romamu in New York, or they're like Kol Neshama in Jerusalem, when they get to certain places, everyone will find a level and harmonize on the melody. And it will sound like a chorus, like a symphonic sound. It'll be a bigger sound as everyone adds their own level to it. We tend to sing more in unison, right? We tend to almost do what Moshe wanted. We each sing as an individual, singing the same melody. But if you've been trained more to sing in harmony, then you feel the richness, the full body of what a song can be. It's what a symphony is. Symphony takes a melody and it adds different voices and rhythms, different instruments, and the sound is a unified sound, but it's a fuller sound than an individual sound. Any comments?
Naba Tehillah.
I'm sorry, what?
Naba Tehillah,
Right.
that group that we had. I don't know if some of you remember the group that they came several years ago to the synagogue, but they do a Shabbat service in Jerusalem based on, they pick like 5 verses and they repeat the verse, and they got drums and guitars and different voices, and it's really amazing. It's like a group chant.
Right. Well, so imagine this moment that, everybody was singing out with the same voice and they sang the whole song all the way through. And suddenly Miriam says, let's do it a little differently. Let's do it with different harmonic sounds. Let's have harmony. And she says to this group, why don't you sing a C? You sing a B, you sing an A. And she says, let's change the rhythm a little. And then she orchestrates this kind of harmonic symphony of chorus. And they hear themselves, like what Mark was describing, they hear themselves bigger than an individual voice. They hear themselves as a group, right? The power of the group, the power of everyone together singing in harmony. Any comments on that? Questions, comments?
Recently, This isn't Jewish, but recently I attended a concert at the Arts Center, Ode to, um, was it Beethoven?
Ode to Joy.
Ode to Joy. It was phenomenal. And not only was the orchestra marvelous, but they had about 120 men and women that formed the chorus. And many of them were from Palm Beach, Miami Beach, Coral Gables. It was a beautiful concert.
Well,
It was amazing.
that's exactly it. In fact, that was an innovation. Beethoven, I think that's his last symphony, the Ninth Symphony. And the Ode to Joy, which concludes it, is this enormous chorus with his orchestra and adding all of these lustrous harmonic voices and sounds to the symphony as it culminates. Right, because symphonies in his day were with instruments and not with voices. Eventually, that grew in, it was a growing movement that I believe with ballet, with dance, led to a form of opera. And then eventually that became a form. And then they stopped having ballet in many operas. I mean, it was a whole era of experimenting different kinds of musical forms of hundreds of years. This, in effect, is a reflection of that, but it's a reflection of the power of the whole of the group over the power of the individual alone. That's, I think, what Tamar is sharing with us. That's what Miriam adds, because she might not say this directly, but I think she's implying that women see the power of group and men often don't. That doesn't mean men don't work with groups. Men order armies around all the time, right? Armies are ordered almost exclusively by men. Biblically, we have Deborah, but we don't have many examples of women warriors in history. We have Joan of Arc and a few others, but it's mainly men that do the ordering, and it's mainly top-down ordering. This organization, Miriam seems to, this midrash seems to relate that Miriam is seeing the power in everyone together adding their own voices, the power of the group, or we could argue the power of the committee. Now, I know committees can often be very frustrating. And there's the famous, what is it? The camel is a committee's idea of a horse. Designing a horse ends up looking like a camel. Committees can be difficult to work with, but if they're properly worked with, they can also be much stronger than individuals alone. Yeah, Joni?
How do Haredim come to terms with the fact that Miriam's voice was so present at such an important time in in our history, and yet they're not allowed to hear the voice of a woman?
Well, so that's called Kol Isha, the voice of a woman, and it's only certain groups of Haredim. There are issues about it, but mainly they saw Miriam just the way the Torah saw her. She's called a Neviah, a prophetess. She's ordained by God. She's exceptional. And as the exception, her voice, just like Deborah's voice, can be prominent because God has chosen this specific woman for a specific role. Because every woman is, like every man, not chosen for a specific role in that sense, they have to protect themselves from the sexuality of women's voices. Just like they have to protect themselves from women's sexuality. That's the fear, one of the major fears of those who have that approach toward women, is that women are they are seducers of men. Their very presence, the smell, the touch, the look, the sound of their voice will distract a man from what he needs to do, which is Talmud Torah, Tefillah, God-oriented orientation. And if a woman is there sitting next to you or even 2 rows away from you in the shul, you're going to go, oh, look at those legs. Especially if she's not, not covering herself head to toe. But even if she is, look at those eyes. So, because men are easily distracted, so we have to cover women up. We have to isolate them up in the balcony, and we have to not hear their voices. That's the group. But they also recognize that this was a time when God ordained with certain women for special roles. Okay, shall we go to the second text, or do you want to? Okay, thank you. Jeff, let's scroll up. Oh, I forgot there's more. I thought we had, I'd forgotten about this, right? Okay, so maybe someone else want to read for this point? I don't want to wear Bubbie out.
I can read.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thanks, Michelle.
Miriam had learned these words the Lord spoke to your entire assembly at the mountain from the midst of the fire, the cloud and the fog with a great voice, and did not add to them. A great voice for the sake of what? Because it includes within it a great multiplicity of voices, accents, languages, and tones. For the voice is the voice of God, and the image is the image of God, constructed from all of humanity, from all of their different faces and opinions. Hence, she called, sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously, which combines all of the voices completely and connects the personal I will sing to the communal and multifaceted song. Miriam said to them, sing to the Lord and remind yourselves of the image of God within you, constructed of 70 faces, 70 languages, and 70 melodies. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. When you sing to him, you are the blessing his name.
Right, I thought I'd only took the first half of it. The second half, which we thank you, Rachel, for reading, takes it one step further. It goes beyond the Jewish people. Because if you see that 70 faces, 70 languages, 70 melodies, the biblical understanding of the world was there were 70 nations in the world. That's why at Sukkot, there are 70 sacrifices, one for each of the nations of the world, because it's a time of God, of seeing the Sukkot Shalom, of harmony in the world. And so it also says that at Mount Sinai, when God declared the Aseret Dibrot, the 10 Commandments, it was declared simultaneously in 70 languages, which were all the languages of the known of the world at that time, according to the rabbinic tradition. So what this part of it is saying that that Miriam also understood that it wasn't just the Jewish voices that needed to be part of the chorus. Everyone's voice in the world needed to be part of the melody. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. When you sing, you are blessing his name. Know that every human being has God within, the image of God, right? Tselem Elohim is within every human being, not just Jews. So she even expands it to the universal, to the entire world. And then you have, I'd like to teach the world to sing. What is that song? I'd like to teach. That was Coca-Cola, wasn't it?
Perfect harmony.
Right, that was Coca-Cola. Well,
Yes.
and they must have either they took it, she took it from them or they took it from. So that's what that's what it is, right? She's saying, Miriam is saying, I want to teach the whole world to sing in perfect harmony. Let's all sing, everyone. It's the wonderful image, isn't it?
Beautiful.
Yes.
And all of that comes out of Ashira Teshiru, right? Comes out of the change of Moshe saying, I will sing, to Miriam saying, plural, sing to the Lord. And from that, she can construct all of this. The way Miriam brings harmony in, how she expands it into everyone believing they are in the image of God, they're created in the image of God, and it involves the entire world.
So do other churches and other religions use this? Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously.
Sure, that psalm, we sing it all the time, right?
No, we
She-
do. The
Oh yeah,
churches.
no, they use the Psalms. All of Christianity uses Psalms. Now, Islam has its own prayers and its own poems that they use. I don't believe they use direct, no, I'm not sure of this. I don't believe they use direct translations of Psalms from our Bible. I'd have to look at that, but certainly all forms of Christianity that I'm aware of use the Psalms directly, and would say, "Sing to the Lord, Shiru Ladonai Baruch Shemo." I mean, we sing that all the time in different melodies, and there are a number of psalms that have that as a theme.
Sing to the Lord.
Okay. Now we'll go to the next one. Thank you, Jeff. Here we go. Now I included the Hebrew here because what Einat Rimon did is she's taking a direct quote from the Haggadah of Pesach, and she's going to tweak it and make it slightly different from what it was. So most of you won't be as familiar with the beginning part of it. Se'u v'limdu, ma bikshu bat paro. But if you look in the Haggadah, it says say umad. It's one of the paragraphs that many people skip. But you'll see the second paragraph is more familiar when we get to it, but it is go and learn. That's what the paragraph begins. Okay, so let's, who would like to read this?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Go and learn what the daughter of Pharaoh sought to teach the children of Israel at the time that she had compassion upon one of the children of the Hebrews and raised him like her own son. That one who raises an orphan boy or an orphan girl in his house is considered by Scripture as if he gave birth to them. Hence the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Bitya, I guess, a name that means the daughter of the Lord, the daughter of Pharaoh. Moshe was not your son, nor are you my daughter, but I will call you my daughter, Biti. From here, we learn that there are righteous ones among nations of the world that have a share in the world to come.
Okay, so this is the lesson of it says Bitya, but it's Batya in Hebrew.
Right?
Bat is daughter. Yah is one of the names of God. Batya. She's named the daughter of the Lord, meaning the daughter of Pharaoh, but God in effect says, I'm calling you my daughter, right? Because you embraced Moshe, you adopted him and raised him as your own. And therefore you are one of the righteous of the nations. And you have a lesson to teach all of us, right? Now, what is the lesson that is being taught? Now she's going to look at it and she's going to tell us, but now look at the second paragraph in Hebrew. Shebehol dor vador, then it would say, Hayav Adam lirod et atzmo, each generation, a Jew is obligated to see himself as if he went forth from Egypt. She's going to translate it differently, but she's going to use the same pattern. And it will end with, Omdim aleinu lahalotenu. In the Haggadah, if you remember, every generation, someone arises to try and kill us.
Right.
Another paragraph that we often skip in different modern homes. But she's going to use that and she's going to flip it. Not about those who try to kill us from the righteous of the world, but those who enhance us and help us. The righteous of the world that give to Jews support and help. So this paragraph, this section, instead of focusing on our enemies, focuses on our allies. Now think about it in the Haggadah. Instead of, saying, pour out your wrath on those that hate us, say, give blessing to those who've supported us and care about us. Those who've helped and stood with Israel since October 7th. those who reached out during the dark days of the Holocaust and risked their own lives to save our families in their basements and in their shelters, and found ways to feed them and to sneak around the Nazis for years in order to redeem families. So that's what she's focusing on. She's saying Batya took this little orphan baby, this Jewish baby, and raised him up and became, if you will, this first one to save us and be a righteous of the nation. So now let's read the paragraph below. Thank you, Jeff. Okay.
As in each and every
Yeah.
you want me to read or
Yes.
somebody?
Thank you.
As in each and every generation, divinity spreads its wings over us and raises up for us women and men from the Jewish people and from the nations of the world, the courageous hearts and resilience of which save us from the arbitrariness, from enmity, and from apathy that come against us to finish us off.
So she begins Shebachol Dor Vador, and she ends Ha'omdim Aleinu Lachalotenu. Both of those direct phrases from the paragraph in the Haggadah. But she takes the message from Batya, a woman in the Torah, who has a role to play in the Exodus story, and says this tells us that in every generation, not only are those that have risen to kill us and destroy us and wipe us out, but there also are those who came to save us. And if we know, many of us know a lot of the stories now about October 7th, there will be a lot more published in the next years going forward. But I believe most of us have heard the stories of the Bedouin drivers at the festival who risked their lives to go back in and save ambulance drivers who went in, took people out, went back in, Bedouin who were killed trying to help Jews and protect anybody they could protect. People who were not Jewish, not only who were killed, but who were there to save. And in fact, in Gaza, in the Israeli army, the IDF, today, there are Bedouins, there are Christians, there are Muslims fighting alongside Jews, men and women in the front lines and throughout this war have been fighting and been a part of the Jewish people. And then there are those who we thought were our allies in many things in the liberal world that we've seen are not, at least not where Israel and Jews are concerned. But we've also seen those who stood up and those who came forward and said, right is right and wrong is wrong. And we stand with Israel. And we've seen a number of wonderful allies do that. And this is a paragraph that focuses us less on those that disappoint us or those that make us feel betrayed, and more focus on those that really are willing to stand and say we matter to them enough that they risk. They risk things for us. They risk attack, humiliation, bullets. That is an appreciation that isn't so much in the Haggadah. And this is a paragraph, this section, which could be plucked out of this midrash and put into a Haggadah as a counter to us thinking only about those who rise up to kill us.
Makes me think of the firemen who left Miami Beach and went over to help in Israel.
Yes, 8 firemen who went. I think one was Jewish, right? Just one was Jewish.
Right.
And the others went and they said they would go back again. They were so moved by what they saw in Israel, and the Israelis were so moved by their being there. Yeah, there are many examples of this. I'm sure you're thinking right now of them, things you've seen, heard, felt, things you know yourself. I just heard an interview. I listened to Unorthodox. It's a podcast, and they interviewed Dr. Phil. He's not one of my favorites, But
No.
Dr. Phil apparently, right after October 7th, came out with this major statement of 5 or 6 minutes, which I had missed. I hadn't seen it. Basically saying, I know what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. And this was evil. And what is right is what Israel is doing in order to defend itself. And he said in this interview, I still stand by what I said then. The reality is, yes, there's a lot of pain and suffering in this, but they were attacked viciously, in a barbaric way. They had not only every right, they are the ones who are in the right in this. Okay, so here you had a non-Jew, clearly a public figure who has taken a lot of abuse for what he said. He said he received death threats. He's been threatened by a lot of things. Now he's in a powerful position, but still, there's nobody that says you have to risk. No one demanded. I've noticed, I follow Taylor Swift. I'm not a Swiftie exactly, but I am a Swiftie adjacent. Because I admire her, and I've admired her from the time she was 16. And I saw what she was doing on country music when she had her first hits, and she was writing. It was early on. And that, she's the kind of person, she's not a party person. She hasn't had any drug issues that have blown up. She's, and she's really cares about her fans, and she cares about humanity. She's donated monies. She supported liberal causes. She came out for gays and lesbians in a very big way, featuring them in one of her major videos. Anyway, there's been a lot of pressure on her social media from some of her fans to come out for the Palestinians. Now, she hasn't come out for Israel either. She hasn't commented on it. But I can understand the kind of pressure that public people have and what they risk when they do it. When a Dr. Phil comes out like that, that's a big risk. He risks financial things. You don't know what there is potentially. Risk physical. He risks damage to his reputation. He risks being canceled in certain circles, and he's starting his own network, right? Yeah, 24/7 network. Really? So it's a big financial risk as well. I'm just saying, it's a good thing for us to call out our enemies. It's a better thing for us to call out our allies and to remind us of who stands up for us when we need them. Oskar Schindler was an SOB in a lot of ways. He was a despicable human being in many ways. But we called him out as our ally because he saved 1,200 of us, right? We ignored all of that because of what he did for us. And that's important. It's important that we thank the Christian evangelicals who support Israel and still support Israel now, even though we disagree with that, why they support Israel and their position on abortion and lots of positions. But we thank them for what they do to support us. And that is, by the way, what AIPAC does. AIPAC doesn't look at anyone's position on anything other than Israel. That is the only thing AIPAC does. And therefore, if you are supportive of Israel, you are supported by AIPAC. And there are many of our liberal community who criticize AIPAC because we supported some really awful people over the years. Lindsey Graham among them, one of the stalwarts for Israel. But the truth is, it's why Israel is supported by Congress. It's why Israel has the Iron Dome. It's why Israel has David's Arrow. It's why Israel is supplied with F-35s. It's why Israel can fight this war the way it's fighting it. And I want to say something about this war. I've said it in a couple of settings, but I can't say it enough. In the 6-day war, 6 days, about 900 Israeli soldiers were killed. 73 war, 21 days, almost 3,000 Israeli soldiers were killed. This war is 4 months in. Less than 300 combatant soldiers have been killed after October 7th, right? Once the initial onslaught, but less than 300 in 4 months. And the estimates are more than 10,000 Hamas terrorists have been killed in these battles. It's a very different war, and it's being fought very strategically, and it will be studied in military colleges all over the West, how this is being fought. Because whatever Israel's doing right now, we're going to be doing at some point against someone. Might be the Houthis. We don't know who will be fighting, but it will be urban, it will be underground, it will be difficult. And what Israel's doing right now is setting the bar for what we will study, our soldiers will study, so that they will protect soldiers going forward. Anyway, so any comments, any questions?
That's a beautiful drosh. I put Dr. Phil's his speech. I posted the YouTube link in the chat.
Oh, thanks,
If
Mark.
anybody wants to copy it and hear it afterwards. It was really terrific. I remember it when it came out.
Unconscionable attack on
Wait, I'm trying to
Israeli
stop it.
civilians by Hamas gunmen on
That's it.
October
I can't
7th.
stop it. Okay, I stopped it. Yeah, I want to watch it. Yeah,
Yeah, you just got to copy the link.
yeah,
Or you got the
I
link.
did. Yeah. Good, thank you. Any other comments?
Is the source of this second drosh then, you said it's from the Hebrew that we were reading that is in the Haggadah?
Yeah,
But
what
we
she
don't
did.
usually translate it as, or
No, it's translated. It's just, in our Haggadot, which are liberal, we tend to take out some of the icky parts.
I see.
Our Haggadot tend to take out some of the icky parts, like opening up the door and saying, pour out your wrath upon them, O Lord, right? There's a whole paragraph about that. Usually that's missing in our Haggadot, in the more liberal ones. This one about every generation they rose up to kill us is there, but not everybody says it. It's one of the sections that a lot of modern Jews skip over. Just like, the early Reform didn't put in the 10 plagues. If you look at the Union Haggadah, which was one of the early Haggadot of the Reform movement, there's no 10 plagues. We were killing innocent Egyptians.
So this midrash is the first commentary that really focused on the righteous Gentiles or whatever. Is that what the midrash was instead focusing on? That's the point?
Well, yeah, it's taking Bitya from the Torah, her saving Moses, bringing the lesson of Bitya into the Haggadah story.
Wow.
And giving us a different focus in the Haggadah. So that's a way of using the Torah story in order to change our focus in our recounting the Torah story every year at Pesach.
Wow.
I don't know if it was the first. I can't say that. There may have been others who've tried, but it's the one that got published in Der Shuni.
Wow.
Okay. So one last class next week. See you next Thursday. And thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Rabbi.
Happy President's Day.
Feel better,
Take it
Jeff.
easy with the boat show and the art show and spring break, and be safe out there.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, on the toe.
Feel better, Jeff.
Thanks.
Thanks. Feel better.